Medieval revival of learning. Muslim libraries and the first universities. So, Islamic libraries would preserve texts, like ancient Greek texts, by translating them into Arabic. And then during the Crusades, Christian scholars found out about these and visited the libraries so that they could translate the texts and bring them back to Europe. So, now that all these Greek texts were now in Europe in Latin, which was the language of the church, which not everyone spoke Latin, pretty much only the educated people did, but it people all over Europe spoke it. So then people in specific areas would translate it into their vernacular languages, or like say in Germany, people would translate it into German specifically. And this allowed even uneducated people to read these texts. So now that these texts were like available to everyone, universities started showing up where people would study them in great detail and form communities around them. So at universities, you would study like philosophy, geometry, grammar, and you also learned to uh, investigate the text yourself instead of just following the church, which kind of follows the idea of vernacular languages, like you're breaking away from the church and forming your own ideas and identities. Um, so Ibn Sina was a Muslim philosopher who read the entire Quran by the age of 10. He was an author, a physician. He wrote 100 books about medicine, astrology, all kinds of science. And he was the first, or one of the first people to really dive deep into scholasticism, which is taking logic and reasoning and attributing it to religion to explain certain like mysteries, which is something that Thomas Aquinas was very famous for doing. He wrote the Summa Theologiae. I probably pronounced that wrong, but he wrote or started to write this whole book where he answered hundreds of questions about religion and then answering them using reason and provable laws. He joined a group of friars called the Dominicans at 17 years old. He was named the Angelic Doctor. He's the Catholic saint for universities. But suddenly, in December of 1273, he just decided that he would never write again. He said, I can do no more. Such secrets have been revealed to me that all I have written now appears to be of little value. Which is kind of crazy coming from a guy who, like, dedicated his whole life to writing this book, but whatever. Um, so then vernacular. As I said, the church taught Latin, preached Latin, so people all over Europe spoke it. But if you zoomed in on one little town, most people there wouldn't speak Latin. They'd speak a slight dialect, which would eventually evolve into French, English, German, Italian, those types of things. So authors and scholars started to realize this. So then they would publish certain things in those vernacular languages, so that even not just the educated people could read it, like anyone could. Um, Such as Dante, Chaucer, De Pizan. All of these people wrote really important philosophical works in these vernacular languages so that they're available to the general public. And this also brought on an idea, a wave of like thinking for yourself, not just taking what the church said. Because if you can make your own language, you can like make your own ideas, I guess. And so Dante wrote a whole book about it, about how like most of the book, to be honest, was just him debating why Italian was the best vernacular language, but a lot of it was also about how it, inspires like a feeling of uniqueness, I guess. Um, so Dante's other works included the Divine Comedy, which you probably know from as Dante's Inferno, where a character goes through hell, purgatory, and heaven, and it shows how like beliefs and morals evolved through vernacular. And he wrote it in Italian, which, as I said, is a vernacular, and just kind of like set up this whole thought of people can learn about religion even if they don't learn it in Latin. And then Chaucer wrote the Canterbury Tales in English, which again is a form of vernacular. And although he didn't finish it, it's still studied today to see how the jobs and classes interacted, because it was one of the first pieces of literature where it was actually an accurate representation. So both Dante and Chaucer are incredibly important vernacular authors.